All right, so here we are at Machu Picchu, at the entrance to Machu Picchu, the one of the seven wonders of the New World, an amazing marvel of architecture, and truly an amazing place, which I'm willing to bet you're going to love just as much as I do. Now, right now, it's a huge tourist attraction. Buses take you up, trains take you in, and there's a huge lineup, all full of people waiting to see this place. Now, it wasn't always like that, obviously. And in fact, this place was hidden for hundreds of years. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about that as we go. So before we start, we're going to go all the way back to sort of what is this all about? And we're not really sure. We don't know what it was made for, we don't know how it was designed, we don't know any of these things. It's truly a mystery that was hidden for centuries. But what we do know is that it was made basically around the time of Pachacuti, which is mid 1400s, and that it was lost in time. It was all sent off when the Spanish came and they conquered the Incans. They took over the entire area, and we have no clue about any of this stuff until they started making land claims. Because what the Incans had to do is they actually had to claim back their own land. And there's one line in a land claim book that talks about the Incan royalty claiming as their land a place called Picchu, which is this area here. This tells us that it used to be property of the king, property of the emperor. And the Spaniards, who had hundreds of land claims to process, didn't even bother sending anyone out, didn't look at what it was all about. They just said, sure, okay, sounds good, signed it off. They never saw this even once. And so the Incans hid it away from the Spanish until all of this time. And hundreds of years passed, nature took over, and it wasn't until 1911 that we find someone, that we found a Western explorer, a professor from Yale, amateur archaeologist, that decided he was going to come down here. Now what he was looking for was a place called Vilcabamba, which was the last Incan stronghold against the Spanish when they were trying to drive the Spanish back out. It didn't work, they lost, and this city became fabled as the last city of the Incans. And this is what a guy named Hiram Bingham was looking for. Now he went searching and searching until he got to this place, which is what we're going to talk about, where a local family told him about this ruins called Machu Picchu. And an 11-year-old boy, a local who lived in the area, guided him up to the top of this mountain, and he came up and he saw the bare bones of this beautiful place. Now, it didn't seem like much because nature had taken over, the jungle had grown up around it, and there really wasn't much to it. But he took a whole bunch of photos and he thought, okay, I found a place. This could be it. But he didn't even come back the next day. That was the last time he ever saw it before he went back to the States. But he brought his photos with him. And the photos so enraptured the people back there that they funded another expedition and had him come down and start clearing off this area. And in 1911, we begin to see Machu Picchu reappear out from the jungle. Over the years, it got reclaimed and reclaimed until the national treasure that it is today. And as we go through, I want to show you a little bit about what it was. I want to tell you a little bit about the theories that surround it, but most of all, I'm going to talk about the architecture, the inner workings, and the cosmology that lies all behind it. So we're going to continue on, but I just want to welcome you to an amazing place. So here we are in the absolute most amazing spot, Machu Picchu, looking down upon the city. Now I want to talk just very briefly about what we think this might be. If we look down there, we can see all sorts of structures and all sorts of processes and the terraces and all the rest, but we still don't exactly know what it was. And there are three popular theories that I want to talk about briefly. The first one, and the most likely, is that this was the summer retreat for the emperor. The Incan emperor would come up here, retreat from Cusco, and have himself a bit of a time working remotely in this place up here. How do we know this? Because of the skill in the masonry and the architecture of some of the places that they call the royal palaces. And those places, that kind of finished product to such a high degree was only done for royalty. The second thing that we think was probably true is that this was a shrine. This was a religious place. And there's going to be a number of spots that we're going to explore, which is going to prove exactly that. And it's amazing. But the third thing happened almost by accident because of a fire that happened not far off from Machu Picchu. And I'm not entirely sure where it is, to be honest. It could be anywhere in the region, but it's pretty close to here. There was a forest fire and a lot of the trees burned off, and what they found underneath all that was the remains of a corral that would have held roughly 1,000 llamas, which was the pack animal of the time, and they could carry maybe 25 kilos. But the fact that you had 1,000 pack animals, or the ability to corral 1,000 pack animals, made them believe that this was a place where traders would come, and that this was an economic and a trading center. Now, you may think, why would they put on top of this giant hill? But remember, for the Incans, hills were no big thing. So these are our three most popular theories, and I'll let you decide on it as we go. Okay, so here we start to see the terracing. Right? There are over 700 terraces. This is just a small number of them. They were designed for all sorts of things. We're going to talk first about the farming. Being nice open plots of land, they were good spaces for farms. But where did all the soil come from? Well, it came from the banks of that river way down there, carted up one basket at a time. Feels like the rooftop of the world. Yeah. Tops of these mountains, the valleys far below, and nothing but this amazing wonder of technology up on top. Yeah, quick pan. So we're going to be sitting here looking at all this agricultural area, all of this farmland that they created on top of the mountain. And to have some nice soil brought up so that the farmers could live here and till the soil and bring food to the place. Soil is only one important part. The other important part, of course, is water. And how did they manage all the water? During the rainy season, there can be plenty of rain that comes down, but not a whole lot. But what they did do is they created a very inventive canal system, kind of like the Romans, that stretched 2,400 feet, roughly 800 meters, bringing in water from all over this region, channeling it in so that it would feed the crops, and then draining it out off the side of the mountain if as needed, if it overflowed. So not only were they able to bring all this soil up and grow food for themselves, but they were able to bring in all sorts of water to allow the crops to grow. As you can tell, there's plenty of sun, and we did luck in because this tends to be a very cloudy area. I love the fact that I'm here on a sunny day, but there's normally a lot of cloud. Not that that's a big point. One of the things I do want to point out is that even with all of this space and all of this agriculture, this could really only feed, they estimated, around 55 people year-round full-time. So
if they needed all of this food and didn't have enough food for all of these people, because Machu Picchu can hold roughly about 500, what would they do? And one of the things that we're guessing is that this wasn't a full-time occupied place, which means either the royal retreat on a temporary basis makes sense, but so does the economic hub where food would be brought in on the caravans as they went. So again, lots of ideas on what this might be, but no real definitive proof for any of the three categories. Alright, so here we are at the city, and the architecture is amazing and it's so well laid out, but the thing is, the magic is actually in the terraces. Now the terraces have the purpose of creating a bit of farming, some flat land where you can do some agriculture, but that's just the icing on the cake. That's just the excess little bit, where the true function was nothing like that. What these really were fortifications or foundations for the piece up above. And they were ingenious, because what they would do is they would have a finished stone wall like you see there, and then they would have large rocks at the bottom, smaller rocks in the middle, light gravel above that, and then clay and sand, and then they would put the topsoil on top of that. So what that would allow is for all the water to drain through, and all the rainfall wouldn't flood the place. And as well, it would mean that, we're getting into the crazy part. It would mean that all of this process, sorry. It would mean that not only would it allow for water channeling so that you could divert all the water out safely, but it also meant that as they built more rocks, or they built more buildings on top using all this stone, all the weight of the added stone in the buildings wouldn't push out to the sides and cause the process to collapse down the hill into the river below. So they would form like buttresses that we would see in the Middle Ages, but in a totally Incan mountain way. And so without all of those terraces, we would never have had Machu Picchu. One of the things I want to point out for a moment is right here. These are the quarries. This is where the Incans were getting all of their building material. They didn't have to quarry this in from all sorts of places and carry it around. It was right here. And they pulled it out so that they could build it up. We'll talk a little bit more about the stones, but for now I want you to remember they were building off what they had. So let's take a look at this rock here. This was found, it was a partial rock, and it's showing us that a good process of how things were working. Underneath you'll see a little cylindrical area here. They could roll the rock around, but you'll notice also in the process of polishing it flat on this side, and they would use either a hematite rock to sort of snap away at it, or they would use a series of smaller rocks like into sand as sandpaper. And that's how they would turn this into such a flattened rock through lots and lots of effort. And getting these rocks up here wasn't the problem. Cutting them into the main process wasn't a problem. Getting them into the fine masonry as opposed to the coarse masonry took all the effort. So we're moving out of the agricultural area and into the city itself. And I want you to notice the fact that these are tiered, that there's rows going up and down to make maximum use of as much land as possible while still not having to level everything off. And the second thing I want you to notice, I'm going to see if I can curl on in there. Look at the finish on the stone. We're going to get down and we're going to take a look at some of these places, but how smooth that stone is, just how astounding the work is. This would have been sort of the official residence, the royal palace, and the urban center. But what an amazing spot. It's astounding. Alright, so this would be the end of the Incan Trail and the main entrance into the city. So all of these people were coming in through the trails. I want you to notice the lintel, just how massive that is, and the sheer finish of the rocks along each side. They would be coming into the main city section, past all the farms, probably bringing goods or bringing whatever they needed to carry, and walking through all of this. Now, obviously, this is all broken. This is all the remains, but I want you to picture it in its prime. All of these buildings, all of these houses, all of these various structures, a big city made out of stone. Look at this, down into the city, down to sort of the residential centers. Check these things out. Right? This would have been part of the foundation, part of the actual mountain itself, and they would build around it. The Incans were really good at sort of having an organic building style where they would create a city or a process which was built sort of to blend in with the land itself. So they thought of the rocks as living beings. They thought of these as actual things, and for them, this was a sacred process. So as we see, there's our terraces, this is our city, but you know what? This is probably the heart of the process, and this, oh, it's one of a couple of hearts of the process. This is the Sun Temple, and it has some amazing properties. We're going to take a look, and we're going to notice that as we go up on here, we're going to basically go straight into the path of the sun. You can see the shadow going through that one little window. Let's see if I can zoom in here. And it goes onto that rock. And we're going to see that rock, that big piece of bedrock that has a channel in it. Now, one of the things that we're going to notice is that on the equinoxes, summer equinox, winter equinox, the sun will come up and it will rise directly through that window and straight down that rock, which was the sort of the spine of the mountain. It was a sacred rock, and it was aligned perfectly to go straight up and down that channel. So they understood quite well the movements of the sun, the movements of the planet in relation to the sun. But another interesting thing is that this would align with the stars. If we were to point straight through and point straight up, and if this was the night sky, what we would find are the Pleiades. Pleiades? These are the cluster of 7 stars that Orion's bow in the constellation Orion, he's actually, his bow, if you extend it straight out, goes to the Pleiades, that cluster of little 7 stars. So it was really sort of a marker, not only for the sun, but for the stars themselves. And it's one of the things that sort of try and convince us that this was a sacred site. This was a religious place, not necessarily economic or royal, but religious. And while we do that, I'm just going to pan on out and take a look through, just to give you a little bit more of a sight of this place, because it is astounding. Okay, we're going to take a look. This is the valley on the west side. And my guide just told me the name. There's a little plateau up here, and that's Yaxtabamba. Yaxtabamba. I'm going to say that a couple of times just so I can get it right. I want you to remember Yaxtabamba. It's another shrine. It's another site, and it's going to come in handy later on. So this is an interesting rock. We call it the Southern Cross Rock because it has our 4 signs, our 4 points, specifically made in the shape that you would connect to create a cross, which is a bit of a stretch of the imagination, but if you were to follow it straight up, off and up the thing, into the skies at night, that's where you would see the Southern Cross. Again, alignment with stars and sun was everywhere in Machu Picchu. All right, here we are at probably what is the most important part of this entire place. And there's a nickname for this one. I'm not going to try and give you the Incan name, but this is called the hitching post of the sun. Inti Huacama, I think. And I want you to look both at the angle of that top little piece of rock, how it's ever so slightly curved, and I want you to look out along the process of the mountain range. And we're going to go from there. I'm going to turn a little bit to picture this guy right here, this mountain. And I'm going to turn off to this direction. We'll see that mountain range in the back. We're not allowed to stay, so I can't tell you too much about it right now. We're going to, as soon as we can take a break, we're going to sit in another location. We're going to talk about this hitching post of the sun. Okay, so as you can tell, there's our ranger over there trying to get people to keep on going past the hitching post of the sun in Tihuatana, I've been told. So we're going to go over here so we can get a better view of the city while we talk, but I want to talk about the hitching point. Now, one of the biggest gods in the Incan religion is Inti, or the sun god. And the sun was seen to move off in the east, rise in the east, and head off and set in the west. And this rock was designed with a couple of things in mind. And I'm not sure where to start, so I'm just going to list them off in no particular order. Now, one of the things we noticed, and one of the things that the priest did, and the reason it got its name, was that the sun would oscillate back and forth, and during the equinoxes it would lean off towards one side, and the winter equinox it would lean off to the other side. And they were the symbolic nature of this, with the hitching point, was that they would do a ceremony that would rope in the sun and hitch it to this rock so that it didn't have the ability to simply drop down underneath the earth, never to return. And so they did this ritual at every equinox just to keep the sun upright in the sky. The second thing we notice, and I can't do it from the hitching point, but the sun rises in the east over one of these big mountains. You can just see it there in the distance. Right over the tip of that, it comes straight across the sky, past the hitching point, right? Hitching post, sorry. And then sets in a mountain off in the west that we can't see because of the clouds. These are two of the four prime mountains that we have in this area, in this sacred area. And they all align. So this guy here, who is Machu Huatama? Nope. I'm going to check up the name. I'm going to put it up here. But this mountain here, if we were to stand over there, points straight north. This mountain that rises here, straight to the east. The one over there, straight to the west, and we can't see it, but there's a fourth mountain that's due south. And this point, Machu Picchu, is actually at the midpoint where the north-south and the east-west mountains connect. So it's at the center of all four mountains, forming a nexus or a confluence point. The other thing I want, and I hope that you noticed, that the angle of the stone, the hitching post, because on the equinox, or on during the solstices, winter solstice, summer solstice, is when it was going to rise into the sky. The equinox is the middle. What was I thinking? On the equinox, I'm really sorry. On the equinox, this guy casts absolutely no shadow. And if I was standing on the equator, on the equinox, I wouldn't cast a shadow because the sun would be straight ahead and straight above. So This, however, is not. It's way down underneath. It's in South America. What they had done is, over the course of years and years and years, I would assume, is they had realized that the angle at which the sun variated in terms of its shadow was 13 degrees. And so they shaved the stone by 13 degrees, angling it off so that it casts absolutely no shadow on the equinox. So we have these people here very absolutely well aware of the sun and its patterns, of the spaces and the directions, the cardinal points for the mountains and the geography around them, and their sacred mountains, their sacred spaces. They found a place to put themselves right there, straight into the middle. All right, I'm going to get going, and we'll see another piece down there. So we see that Machu Picchu is at the center point of the four sacred mountains, but it also has an astronomical design to it. How can we see this? Through that shrine at Yactapata, 6 kilometers away, and also through Cusco at the Sun Temple, which is now a convent, but was once the center of the universe. There's a corridor there that fills with light every equinox as the sun rises at an angle of 66 degrees. And this is matched by a similar corridor at Yactapata. Now, the Incans believed that lines of energy radiated out from Cusco across the world, and scattered upon those lines were sacred sites, all split up but following the same process. Yactapata was on one of those lines, and it too had a corridor that led off at 66 degrees. Now, the thing is, if you followed that corridor straight along, it led directly to Machu Picchu. The hitching point, or Intihuatana, would have lined up directly between those two sites, so you would see the sun rise in the morning and then set directly down upon Yactapata, straight along those lines of energy. And this was no coincidence. All right, we're on our way out, and we're at sort of the base of the sea, and you'll notice these massive blocks all placed together. Now they're rough, and they're placed sort of oddly, which makes them a little bit more resistant, but just look at how massive they are. Moving these things around would have been quite an accomplishment. Let's keep on going. This is by far one of my favorite wonders of the world. I've been to some pretty cool places, but I'll tell you, you can't beat this stuff. So one last look at the wonder of the world. Machu Picchu, surrounded by mountains, jungle, and the amazing pieces of architecture and masonry that makes it all that it is.